Here in studio with SMU head coach Rhett Lashlee. Coach, appreciate you making the drive over to Lewisville, Texas.
Great to be back again this year. It's always good to live in town and can just drive right over.
That's exactly right. You still anti-straw?
I am still fundamentally opposed to straws.
Okay.
That likely will not change.
Okay.
It's kind of like in my DNA.
I was drinking a fountain drink before you got here, and then I threw it away right before you got here. I didn't
With
want to.
a straw?
Yeah, well, yeah.
You thought about it?
Yes, I did. I did.
See, it creates a wrinkle.
I did. You know, first off, before we get into other stuff, the fun stuff, I want to ask you a little bit about football. How different is spring practice in year two compared to year one?
It's night and day. It's refreshing from one standpoint, really from our staff. We had one coach who got an opportunity to go be a defense coordinator at Coastal Carolina, but we only had one of our on-the-field 10 coaches change. So in terms of offense, defense, a lot of continuity, a lot of carryover. Obviously for me being in year two, we feel like our program is a little bit more established. We're not implementing things right now. We feel like we're maybe tweaking things, trying to improve, but we kind of know who we are, what our culture is. So from that standpoint, it's been really good. We got some returning players. So, I mean, I remember thinking the other day after our first practice, we just said, man, that felt like football on day one. We weren't coaching a lot of the things we were having to coach a year ago. Now, we've got about 20 new faces in the spring, just because we got 15 transfers and 4 high school kids that have already showed up. So, and we've lost some experienced players. So there's that piece is new and we're working on it, but it has been a little bit, I don't want to say relaxing, but more refreshing going into year two, feeling like we can really build and take the next step now.
And you've been a coach for a long time. You've been around a lot of really good head coaches. So I'm sure you had an idea of what being a head coach was going to be at the college level.
Yeah.
Was there anything that took you by surprise that like took up some of your time or was more difficult or whatever that was different than kind of your vision of what a head coach had to deal with?
I'm sure there was a lot of things. I mean, look, I did know going in that like there's going to be things you just can't be prepared for. Yeah. You know, it's like getting married for the first time or having your first kid. Like there's going to be some on-the-job training that you just got to go figure it out. And but I'd say the biggest thing is just it's constant. Mm-hmm. You know, and you get used to that. I enjoy it. I love our players. I love our staff. I love the whole part of it and everything that comes with it. But you know, if you've got 40 people roughly on the staff and 120 plus kids on a team, that's over 160 people. It's something all the time. And so you get used to it being constant. You learn to trust your people, to delegate more, because if not, you'll burn out and you won't be any good at what you do. So I'm sure there's still a lot of things I have left to learn. There wasn't any like major aha moment surprises other than just I wasn't prepared for how constant it would be when you're not just coordinating one side of the ball, but also love it. So.
You mentioned the newcomers, the transfers, and the early enrollees. You know, when people talk about the transfer portal, it's always in a negative light, and like, you know, how it's going to mess up continuity and cohesionness and all that kind of stuff. You know, from your experience, what are the important things to kind of get those guys on the same page, build that team camaraderie and all that stuff that people think is so important? Yeah,
I mean, we're not gonna where we are. We don't spend our time thinking about the negatives. I mean, look, we can have an opinion. I think when the transfer portal started and it was more grad transfer related, we were in a good place. Mm-hmm. It was for the right intentions. Yeah. A guy like Shane Bichelle graduates in 3 years from Texas. He's been there 3 years. He's been committed there. He's got his degree and wants to transfer. Like that's what I think it was intended for. Now it's become just, hey, kids can go and come as they please, and we're not going to spend our energy on that. We're going to spend our energy on, okay, if that's the rules, like how do we compete in that environment? We got to have great relationships internally with our players and a culture where our guys want to be here. Mm-hmm. And then secondly, we got to go out and compete at a high level with that. And our foundation is still going to be built with Texas high school players. That's not going to change. But year to year, this year we've been very aggressive in the transfer portal. We felt like there was areas we knew after year one we needed to address, and we were going to go out and be aggressive and do that. And I feel like we've brought a lot of really good players in, both from their talent, fitting needs, and character. Now the challenge is we may feel like we've upgraded our roster. We've still got to be a better team, and we've got to become a team. And that's probably the biggest challenge is you used to build programs and you still have to have a foundation and a culture to your program that's consistent, but now you're really just building a new team every year. Yeah. And so we're in team building mode right now up till September too.
Speaking of that, you know, you look at your roster that you had when you inherited it and you look at it now and it's, I mean, 2/3 of it's pretty much different, I would imagine. Where do you think y'all have gotten better? Where do you feel more confident about now than maybe you did that first day on the job?
It's a good question. I think, you know, a year ago there was a lot to be made of our roster because you had a Tanner Mordecai, a Rasheed Rice, a couple guys on defense coming back. We had some big names and some big positions coming back, important positions, but we really didn't have a lot coming back. We lost almost all the offensive production. And so I thought we did some good things, but we were able to see what we thought, and then as the season went on, hey, these are areas we need to get better. I feel like we went out and addressed those spots. I feel like we do have some good mix now of returning veteran players on the O-line and the D-line, at wideout, at linebacker, that are guys that played last year but maybe weren't the guy, but they're ready to raise their level. And then I think we brought in, the right pieces, for example, in the secondary, on the D-line, on the O-line, at running back, in areas that we feel like we needed to address. We're 4 days into spring, but I feel good about where we're headed.
When spring is over, what constitutes like a successful spring? How is that defined for a coach?
For coaches, it's totally different than fans, media, anyone else. Right. Like coaches, you hate spring games and all those things because now something's going to be written one way or the other. It's going to look great, so everybody thinks you're going to go win the national title, or it's going to look terrible and it's doom and gloom, and we just don't want anybody to get hurt, And so what I told the guys before our first practice, like if you look in our south end zone, there's a massive hole now where they're building this facility. I mean, they've moved, 30, 40,000 tons of dirt. Like it's crazy if you look at what it looks like now versus what it's always looked like. And they've been working at that for over 2 months. It's going to take 18 months to build this facility, and we're 2.5 months into it, and they've still just been moving dirt. They're spending a lot of time on a foundation. There's going to be this awesome 3-story end zone complex that over 18 months, they're going to spend, 15, 20% of it, and it's going to look like nothing's happening because they have to get the foundation right. That's what spring is for us. Yes, with all the transfers and all the new moving parts, we got to become a team, and that starts now. It'll progress all the way through fall camp. But we have to get a foundation offensively, defensively. Like we got to understand who we are, identity, what's our base offense and defense. We should have a better understanding in year 2. And then really like things we got to be better at. It's the basics. It sounds very boring, but like on defense, can we run to the football? Can we leverage the ball? And can we tackle? We didn't do that well last year, not to our standards. So we're really focusing on that more than scheme. Yeah. And so it's easy to get caught up in the results of spring. Well, we gave up a touchdown or we did or we didn't. But are those things the foundations being laid that we're going to need come September? Same thing on offense. First 4 games of the year, we turned the ball over at an alarming rate. It's hard to win doing that. And then we were pretty good until the Tulane game, but like, can we value the football? Can we block at an elite level and understand where the ball's going? So there's just fundamental things that like, if we get out of spring healthy and feeling like we've created a culture and a foundation for really the fundamentals, they're going to win and lose games. Then in the fall, you get into the scheme and the results. And so it's hard to do that, but that's really what we're focusing on. That's what would be successful to us.
People have been talking about SMU and conference realignment with the Pac-12 stuff, the commissioners at a basketball game. As the football coach of the university, how do you kind of keep your team from worrying about those kind of things and just kind of put it as background?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit easy because I'm really not a part of any of those discussions, And so our team, we haven't talked about it, haven't asked about it. I think probably for coaches and players, we're used to a lot of outside noise and just going about our business. And, so there's a lot going on that's out of our control. We're in a really good league. We have a really good schedule ahead. We're really focused on what can we do to win a championship at SMU, do something that hadn't been done in almost 40 years. We've had some breakthroughs recently and winning 10 games and winning for 4 straight years and all that. But like, I think there's still like this burning desire for us to do that. And so at the end of the day, it's my job for us to win. All that other stuff takes care of itself, and that I really can't control it. Neither can our players, and so they've done a pretty good job of not really worrying about all that outside noise.
I go to an SMU game this year, and you got guys from ZZ Top out there. You're doing stuff with Eric Dickerson. Who's the coolest person, like for you, that you've met that you've been like, man, I'm a little starstruck here? Do you get starstruck?
Oh, I'm sure I do. You kind of stole the obvious one. Meeting Eric, like when I was the OC here, I never met Eric. He didn't come around. So when I met Eric last spring and actually went out and we played golf a few times out of this place in California, like just to see, the history of what he did at SMU, what he did in the NFL. People, like, he's got a record that'll probably never be broken still for rushing yards in a season. And so, him and Craig James being around a lot's a big deal to us. You got guys like Troy Aikman coming to games and all those guys because either they're just in the area or their kids go. There's a lot of people that you don't know their kids go to SMU. Yeah. And I'm not going to out them all. But so it's hard to say one. But if I had to say one, it's going to be President Bush.
Yeah.
He sits courtside at a lot of our basketball games. He comes and sits in the box at a lot of football games. He's not visible at a football game. every year, especially when we play Navy, but one home game a year, he'll come, he'll talk to the team, go out, flip a coin, and he's just so down to earth, and he knows everything. Like, he'll ask me questions about recruiting. I'm like, okay, you're like keeping up with this stuff. You know what I mean? So there's some real pressure when the president's asking me questions to get them right. Yeah. And it was kind of cool. My wife actually asked his wife when we met him for the first time last year at one of the basketball games, because they had the twins. We have twins. And she's like, she asked, we're talking with his wife and him, and she asked him, hey, what advice would you give to someone with twins? He goes, get a nanny. Like, he didn't even believe it. So, you know, I would say President Bush would probably be at the top of that list.
Speaking of the twins, both sets are getting a little bit older.
Yeah.
Valentine's Day was recently. Are you starting to get into that territory of like girlfriends, boyfriends having to worry about that stuff yet?
It's funny you go there because, yeah, that's the boys, yes. I got one that won't talk about it, like I don't think I did. I got one that he'll tell us everything. So like we know who likes
which one's better. What's better as the parent? I think I'd want to know less.
I don't know. We try not to give them a hard time because I remember I didn't like that. Now the crazy thing is my little girls, which I'm their boyfriend. That's it. They have to. I've like brainwashed them. Like, who's your boyfriend? They say daddy. Like that's a thing, and they've got to say that till at least 30. But we actually did have a deal not too long ago because it was around Valentine's, and like, you know, I don't know, some boy was writing a note like, I love Rowan in the classroom, which is one of my girls. So my wife was asking about it, and she's like, yeah, no, yeah, he liked, but no. And then Scarlett pipes up and goes, no, Rowan likes, and I won't say his name, we'll say Timmy. Rowan likes Timmy, and Timmy likes Rowan. And we're like, oh, how do you know? And she's like, well, Scarlett asked him, you know. So now they're teaming up and helping each other out. And so I think my wife looked at Rowan and goes, well, so if Timmy likes you back, like, does that make you nervous? And she goes, bruh. Yeah. I was like, I don't know. They speak like they're brothers. Right. So we're dealing with that, and I don't like it. But I have learned, I've been told, I can't act like I want to kill every boy they say they like, which I want to, but I've got to act like interested and stuff. Sure. So they'll talk to me about it.
Do you have a strategy of how you're going to deal with like the first boy that comes over? Like, are you already game planning on how this is going to happen?
I don't know if I'm going to get to do it. I'll have I'm learning, like, people, it's making me feel old. Like, Bad Boys 2 was like.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, like people that are under 30, like, what movie? I'm like, wait. And so, but there's the scene when the boy comes. So, you know, what I've decided is I'm going to put all the bad guyness on my boys.
Sure.
So like, hey, dude, you want to take Rowan or Scarlett out? Well, you got to go out with the brothers first and let them take them out, maybe rough them up, just, you know, keep it legal. Right. And then bring them back, and then they can give the report, and maybe I can be a little more good cop.
What you need to do is just offer them a straw, right? And, and if they turn it down, then you're...
I've said this now. At some point one day, there's going to be a guy who's dumb enough to want to marry one of them. And so at some point, like, the first time we go to a meal, I'm going to be watching. And if the dude uses a straw, like, he's got a lot higher hill to climb to earn my respect, because I don't know. You know? Yeah. Again, I'm not judging.
Right.
I just have a strong opinion. So...
You know, the season ends, you know, y'all get what, 3 days that aren't recruiting days, it feels like. You know, it's like a 362 day out of the year job. You know, what does Rhett Lashlee go do? Where do you go? You know, what do you do as a hobby? Kind of how do you get away from football a little bit? Because balance is still important, right? I mean, you got to have some of it.
We do. I like to, we like to travel in general, but we, when it works out, which our bowl game was really early this year, we actually went skiing around New Year's with a family friend of ours from Auburn, and our kids, they're all same age, and our kids like to ski. So we went and did that. And you get right back into January, you're working. And then the month of February for football coaches is really when you can, you know, spend some time. That's when you really, after that February signing day, get a chance to catch your breath. Because February's dead for recruiting. They can't come on your campus. And so, you know, you get like 4 weekends where you're actually technically off. You're not recruiting or anything. And look, I love to play golf. I love to travel. But I learned this, I don't know if I'll do it well, but a while back, like as a football coach, if your family's your hobby, you'll be okay. Yeah. Like, people say, there's plenty of time, but when you have 4 or 5 hours, if you're out playing golf or you're out doing this or you're out doing this, especially as the head coach, you're pulled a lot anyways. When you have time, you got to spend it with your family. So my boys are at a fun age. They're playing baseball, basketball, whatever. We like to go do stuff together, and my girls are a trip. So I try to spend as much time with them as I can. But I do. I like to play golf, I like to travel. Haven't picked up the sticks yet this year, though. So.
What kind of golfer are you? Are you a pretty intense golfer who gets mad, cusses, that kind of stuff? Or are you just out there kind of like Chevy Chase and Caddyshack, just kind of getting it done?
I'm neither. I mean, I've learned that like getting mad, snapping clubs, and cussing doesn't make me any better.
Right, so you have been that guy.
Yeah, when I was probably younger and really immature, you know. I'm super competitive, so I do want to do well and play well, but I don't play it. I play 8 times a year,
right.
So the expectations are lower. But I am competitive. I like to do well, and I don't like doing things that I'm not good at. So, but I've found I actually have more fun playing less because the expectations are lower and I actually play better.
Yeah.
So, I'm from Arkansas, so I swing like John Daly.
Okay.
I do not have a swing you want to look at.
Right.
I mean, it comes way.
So you're
I
hitting
see
bombs.
the club back. I do hit it a long way. It's just
Right.
I don't know where it's going.
Right.
But I grew up the place I grew up playing. Daly was in his prime in the 90s, and he would hit on the backside of the range, 350 yards away, and you'd be hitting, and balls would be rolling by your feet. So, I mean, that's how you learn.
That's one way to learn it. That's one way to learn. Who's the best golfing coach? Is there a coach that you've played with that's like really good at golf, or are y'all too busy to get good at golf?
No,
like
there's plenty of coaches who get really good at golf. Okay. But if you're really good at golf, you better be winning a lot of football games because people are going to ask why you're so good at golf. I don't know. There's this Coaches Classic deal every year around Memorial Day out at Pebble Beach that we got to go to last year. Rick Newhousel's pretty good. Now, he's semi-retired.
Sure.
So I don't know if he counts, but like he's shooting even under par out there.
Yeah.
So he was pretty good.
He strikes me as a guy that'd be pretty good at golf.
Pretty good golfer.
Pretty good at golf.
A lot of coaches think they're good at golf because we kind of think we're good at everything, but really not.
One of the big things I've heard, we were talking about the coaching calendar, Sonny Dykes gave a pretty good answer at the national championship game about balance and needing some time off, and everybody if you could, does the recruiting calendar need to change, and like how can they make it to where it would benefit everyone, or is this just with the transfer portal and the way it is, it's just going to kind of have to be this way?
I think there's still some tweaks that I know, the AFCA is looking at and the NCAA. There's some ways to still tweak it. Because that has been a deal, like how do we keep coaches from wanting to go to the NFL or get out because of the recruiting hours? I think we're heading in the right direction. Over the last probably 5 or 6 years, they've added, the dead period in the whole month of February, the dead period for a month in the summer, the dead period around the Christmas and New Year's holiday. So you get 2 or 3 pockets where it's like a month that you don't worry, well, if I'm not on campus, kids are going to my rival school, et cetera. I think at the end of the day, you got to be comfortable in who you are and what you do. If we're any good at what we do, we don't have to be up there from 6 a.m. to midnight just so we can pound our chest and say, look how hard we work. Look, if we win, they're going to keep us. If we lose, they're not. And they're not going to ask how many hours we work.
Right.
And so I think there's a fine line. You got to be efficient when you're there and you got to work, but you got to take care of your staff. You got to take care of yourself because if you burn out, you're not going to be any good. And so we try to do that. We try to take care of our staff. Obviously, like I said, the month of February is good, but we'll go through spring ball and through spring, and then we'll take the last week of May off. A lot of people don't say, you can't do that. No, you can. And then we'll have 3.5, 4 hard weeks in June, and then we get the same time everybody else gets off. But like when we have an off week in the season, man, we're off. And I've worked for people that, man, we're all up there all Friday and all Saturday of the bye week. Well, you don't have to do those things if you're any good at what you do. At least that's my opinion. And so I think sometimes as a coach, you feel that pressure, man, we got to grind. Well, you do, but you also got to be the best version of yourself and be fresh. So finding that margin's tough, but I think it's important.
Was that hard earlier in the career? You just kind of want to overwork everybody, outwork everybody. Does that just kind of come with just doing it a little bit?
Probably. I think the younger you are, you maybe feel like you have to prove yourself or you don't know. Like the older you get, right, and the longer you do it, the more comfortable you are with the process, the more comfortable you are in what you believe in and what you're doing. But I think it's what do you want your staff culture to be like? And at least for me and my personality, I know I'm better when I'm fresh. Yeah. And I've done it both ways. So, and there's a fine line. Again, we work our tail off. We work a lot, but we don't have to be dumb tough.
When you were a GA back in the day, I need a good GA story. Either going on a recruiting video, like Dave Aranda was Mike Leach's driver, right? And he's got some crazy stories about driving around Mike Leach. Like, what are some of the crazy things that you had to do as a GA?
Well, other than obvious things like just making coffee and doing all the GA stuff, I don't know if any of these are good. There's a couple. So I was a GA at Auburn in 2009, and we were having a big summer 7-on-7, and one of the teams dropped out the day of. So we were going to have an odd number. And the head high school relations guy came to us, and it was me. It was Casey Woods, who's our OC, Eli Drinkwitz, who's the head coach at Missouri, and some others of us. They said, hey, you G's are going to have to put a team together and play in this thing. So we have enough. We're like, we were young enough to do it, but we were old enough we were going to pay for it. And then we go out and we go 5-3. Like in pool play, we're 5-3. We're like the 3 seed in this tournament, and they're like, okay, hey, yeah, you guys are gonna have to like lose. We want them to come back. We're like, what? But for 2 straight days, we played, and we went into the cold tub that night. The next day, I mean, we were probably 27. I don't know, but the other one, we're going to the national championship in 2010. Talk about burning it at every end. We grinded that year, and I'll never forget. We're driving to the stadium where the Cardinals play. We're playing at the Fiesta Bowl, to play Oregon, and turn around and. This is the head coach at Missouri now. Eli Drinkwitz is sitting here like this. I mean, he's out cold. We're playing the national title game in 3.5 hours, and I mean, we videoed him for about 5 minutes. And those aren't great stories, but you know, now when I was first year as an OC at Arkansas State, Eli again was the running backs coach for Gus. And talk about your first year. Gus likes to work, especially that first year.
Right.
We were working, and we had played a Thursday night game in Fort Lauderdale, and we were in Montgomery recruiting. Weather got bad. The plane couldn't take us, so we're having to drive back on a Friday night. Well, we had to be in the office at 8 a.m. the next morning because it was an off week, but we're going to work. And there was no excuse. So Eli and I have to drive through the night. And we stopped at a 24/7 convenience store at like 3 a.m. somewhere in the middle of Mississippi. And it was closed. Now, how does a 24/7 convenience store close? So we realized then Gus had figured out how to put the 25th hour in the day. So I don't know. I don't have great ones, but I'm sure if I thought about it longer, there's some good ones.
You reminded me before we started filming that you were there for the kick six thing at Auburn, Alabama. Where is that like the biggest play you've ever been a part of? Like just like the craziest side? Like where does that rank in terms of like
I mean, it has to be number one.
It has to be.
It was Gus's first year as head coach, my first year back as OC, and you know, we'd had such a great year. The crazy stuff is, so the week before we played Georgia, and we were up 20 going in the fourth quarter. People forget both these things. We were up 37-17. We're whipping them, and we blew it. And they came all the way back to go up 38-37. And then we caught the tip Hail Mary deal. They call that the prayer and Jordan here. So we win that game. So then we had a bye week, and it's 1 versus 2. It's like or 1 versus 4, whatever it was. The Iron Bowl, like whoever wins in the West and a game away from the national title game. And that game was 28-21, and we score with like 40 seconds left to tie it. So it's going to over. Like it was a good football game, but people just remember that play. Right. And but yeah, I mean that's the Stanford Cal game of my lifetime, of my era. That I grew up watching the Stanford Cal kick return with the band on the field over and over. Like that's going to be for 25 years. People just talk. I mean, it was just. In a game of that magnitude, that's a rivalry game, with so much on the line, for it to end that way, like it was about to be the first Iron Bowl to ever go to overtime. Yeah, you know, I don't think I can top that one.
Are y'all sitting over there preparing for overtime? How do you even see?
Yeah, we scored with 40 seconds left and kicked the extra point and made it. And I remember Gus going, "Hey, start thinking about overtime." I went, "Oh yeah." So I'm looking at overtime, and then they get to midfield, the clock runs out, Saban challenges, they get a second back. Now they're kicking a 57-yard field goal. And we actually had the leading punt returner in the country that year, Chris Davis. So we go out and I just put a safety back. Well, Gus calls timeout the ice kicker, and we're like, hey, we got the best punt. If we're going to put a dude back there, like let's put Chris back there. Sure enough, oh yeah, okay. So they put Chris back there, and on the sideline, we hadn't practiced it, said, hey, if you don't hear a second thump, which means we didn't block it, you guys they don't have any tacklers on the field. They got all linemen and tight ends and kickers. So once you hear it kicked, you guys just run and just create a wall on our sidelines. Chris, if it's short and you catch it, set it up, hit our sidelines, and see what happens.
Geniuses.
There it is.
You know, Cam Newton was here in Texas for a year at Blinn, you know, and he did some things. Like you watch some of those highlights, and it's like man amongst boys.
Oh, yeah.
What was like your quintessential, like, oh my goodness, this guy's different?
Well, the first one was when we weren't going to we had Tyreek Rollison. From I think Sulphur Springs, was a freshman at Auburn, and we kind of thought he was the future, and then some things happened, and we weren't looking for a transfer QB of any kind, and there was a running backs coach at Blinn, had been the running backs manager at Arkansas when I played, and he called us for like a month, like, hey, there's this guy, there's this guy, Cam Newton, he transferred from Florida, he's either going to go to Oklahoma and play tight end or Mississippi State and play quarterback, but I think you guys need to look at him. So after about a month, we finally said, fine, we'll watch the film. And, of course, we see him, like, jumping from the 8-yard line into the end zone.
Right.
And we're like, yeah, okay. So we take him, and we're playing our first game of the year. So you go through spring, and, like, he's not live. So he's just playing normal quarterback, and he was okay, missing some throw here or there, whatever. And you think you know what he's going to be, but you hadn't seen it. So we play Arkansas State, first game of the year, and we're on the left hash, and we run like a play act, like an inside zone read bootleg. So he's going to boot right to the field and have like a flood concept. He comes out of it. He takes 3 steps. The defensive end rushes up the field. And instead of like any other quarterback dumping it in the flat, stretching it out, throwing it away, whatever, he sticks his foot in the ground and turns and runs right down the middle of the field, 75 yards for a touchdown. Looked like a quarterback draw almost. And we were kind of like, okay, this guy's a little different. And then it just felt like every week, whether we're playing Georgia or out, it didn't matter who, he just did stuff that you were literally on the headset going, wow, during the play.
Does that make it easier to call plays for, or almost harder because like you don't even know what he's going to do once it starts like breaking down? He starts freelancing.
Well, he was coachable, and so I think that helped. And it makes it easier because you can get really good at something and have an identity. You don't have to overcreate because either you get really good at it and it's going to work, or he's going to make it right. Yeah. And we call it in coaching like having an eraser. Him, Nick Marshall, Derek King, those guys were erasers, which means the defense can be right and still be wrong. And so you just try to put them in position doing what they're comfortable doing and knowing that if they get us, hey, they'll make it right. Yeah.
Speaking of really good players, Rasheed Rice, wide receiver for y'all this year, huge numbers, going to be an NFL draft pick. SMU's kind of quietly wide receiver especially the G5 level. I think Alabama is the only other team that has more NFL players right now at that position than you. What makes Rasheed Rice like so special?
Yeah, I think especially last year, just the body control he had in the air to like use his body to still catch a ball, hold off a defender, or get a pass interference call it's really remarkable. Like the way he could catch contested catches. I don't think enough gets talked about how physically strong he is. He's an incredible blocker. He's super smart. I think people too, he led the country in the regular season in receiving. And I think what goes unnoticed is he broke his toe in the first quarter of the TCU game, week 4. And we didn't make a big deal about it. We saw he had turf toe, which for a few weeks we thought he did. But then, he played the whole season like that. And if you watch our first 3 games, especially against Maryland, where he just dominated, he was at a different level of explosion. But to still do what he did on literally a broken toe, that there was a point in time we thought we were going to have to shut him down. They're going to have season-ending surgery. I thought it was pretty incredible. And you see now he's healthy. He goes to the combine, and I think officially a 4.51, but I know 6 scouts had him at 4.44 to 4.46. Top vertical jump, one of the top broad jumps, one of the top 10-yard. He's an explosive guy too. He's not just a possession guy, but the best thing about him is just his ability to make contested catches. You can't coach that.
Yeah. When you lose stars like Cam Newton or Rasheed Rice, whoever, how do you kind of go about not only just replacing the production, because that's probably multiple guys that have to do that, but just kind of like giving the other players the empowerment to go out and kind of fill that void?
Well, I think, this year we feel like our receiving core may be better as a whole. We'll be deeper. Outside, we'll get a Jake Bailey back. Hopefully he'll stay healthy. And our system is designed to just, take the open guy. We can find matchups within it, but we're not usually force-feeding the ball. As we got into the season after the first couple games, we knew what we had in Rasheed, and it was like, well, when you have a special player, you're going to build things through those people. I think this year, look, the message is first of all, guys come here because, to your point, they know, I don't know if SMU's a wide receiver but we do have the second most in the NFL, or at least we did coming into this year. Scouts come here now, who's the next one? Who's the next one? And so guys come with high expectations, but knowing that, look, if we don't have a guy with 100 catches this year, but we may have 5 guys with 40 or 50 catches, that actually is probably going to make us harder to defend.
Right.
And I think that, one guy may raise his level, but we're not going to force it. We're just going to go through the system and see what we have. And then as we learn guys' strengths, try to play to those.
Lastly, the American Conference is changing. New teams coming in, some teams leaving. As a coach, how early do you start scouting those teams and thinking about that stuff? Is that later down the line, or do you already kind of start figuring that stuff out?
As soon as we get done with spring ball and the coaches go on the road recruiting, that's when a lot of your graduate assistants, your analysts, will really start looking at the people on your schedule, especially the ones your first 3 or 4 games and who you're unfamiliar with. So for us, our first game's Louisiana Tech, and then OU and Prairie View and TCU. Those are important. But to your point in the league, there's a lot of new faces on that schedule. I still think we're going to have a great league. I mean, look, I know that what Cincinnati's been the last few years, and UCF and Houston have had good squads. I know they're leaving, but you bring in a UTSA who's playing as good as anybody, used to winning championships. Look, when you have a culture of winning championships, it doesn't really matter who you play. Right. and Jeff's done a great job there. And then UAB and FAU, like those have been the teams dominating Conference USA. They're all coming in. You see what Tulane's built now and what we feel like we're about to do. So it's a good league, but we will. You won't overdo it the further out in your schedule. Some people like break down week 10. Look, who we are and who they are by week 10, who knows? And there's going to be 8 or 9 games to look at in the season. So, the first game's the most important because it's brand new. Who knows what team's going to come out in different? You don't have any film. So we'll look at all of them. But, yeah, there's some teams in our league we got to get familiar with because we don't have that same consistent familiarity we're used to.
I lied. I got one more. You just talked.
Right. It's like a coach. Always got one more.
Right. Yeah. You talked me into it. With the playoff expanding soon and like SMU being right there as a favorite of one of the biggest G5, they've been kind of out of the spotlight for like 40 plus years. Since the death penalty and all that kind of stuff. How exciting is it to be at SMU right now in this moment of college football?
I think this is a huge moment for us. I just think everything's lining up. From we've been winning consistently. We've got great alignment. In our administration all the way down, the support we need. We've got a beautiful indoor facility. We're building a $100 million football facility. There's just a lot of really good buzz, over the last 3 or 4 years with the Triple D in the city and just all the things we have going in our direction that it feels like we're building to breaking through, to your point. And we have a great history and tradition. So there's a lot of, I think, excitement around what we think we can do and what we hope to do moving forward. And I think that's just the bottom line is we're working hard. We want to bring a championship back to SMU because we've won so many in the past, but not recently. Yeah. And, I just think in our league and all the things at our disposal, like this year, if you win, you still probably go to New Year's Six. And after that, the data says if you win the American, you're going to be one of the 12 in the playoff. Yeah. I think only 2 years since the model changed has the American champion not been that school. So we feel like we're in a great position if we can, learn to win our league and try to be one of the top teams in our league every year, that we're going to have opportunities to do things that just really hadn't been done in a long time here.
I mean, it feels like for most of my life it's been a disadvantage to be in a big city as a college, but now it feels like with NIL and the way things are changing, it's an advantage to be in a big city in college.
I know it's an advantage for us to be in Dallas. We say it a lot, we're the only Division I school in Dallas, and we are. There are three Division I schools in the Metroplex, but there's only one in Dallas. And the city of Dallas, the jobs, obviously the SMU alumni base is just, it's incredible. It's really hard to put into words. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you worry about pro cities and all that. I think we've done a good job. The mayor's been great, embracing each other. We've got to continue to win. We got to bring some championships home. If it's the old field of dreams, if you build it, they'll come. If you win, they'll come. Yeah. And I think the buzz over the last several years has really started to happen. And so, there are some challenges, but I think we got a lot more advantages being right there in the heart of Dallas than probably people notice.
All right, Coach. Appreciate your time.
Hey, appreciate y'all having me. Love what y'all do. I mean, there's not what Dave Campbell's does for high school and college athletics. There's no one else in the state or in a state in the country that covers athletes and football and the way that y'all do. Y'all do a great job, and you're great for our game, so we appreciate it.
Rhett Lashlee's hired, so we got a new Dave Campbell's employee.
How's the job security?
Better than yours, better than college football coaching, I'd imagine.
All right, keep me on the short list.
All right. Appreciate y'all.